sang this song to me. There was a message in its melody, sweetest lyrics that I ever heard. There's a message in the songs of birds. Tomorrow is another day. Living is the only way. Tomorrow's gonna ever come. Listen to the words of the song. Everything gonna be alright. Everything is gonna be.
Welcome to A Sip of Inspiration. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, known as the Empowerment Doctor, and I want to thank all of you who have tuned in to listen to us tonight, and for those of you who will listen to us in the future. As you know, that I always like to share information that will help us change our lives, because I believe that we're capable of changing our lives and living the best life, the life that we dream about. And if you're not dreaming about any, we're going to help you get some dreams too, because I want you to do all that you were sent here to do so that the world can be a better place. You can, if you're watching this on Facebook on my personal page. That's Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, or the Empowered DR. And that's wonderful. And you're also watching on my business page, which is the Empowerment Dr. DR. And with success, you are actually watching it live on YouTube. So I am incredibly excited about that. So trying not to stumble over. So go to my website, champagneconnection.com. That's champagne like the liquor and not the city. CHAMPAGNE connection, single connection.com, and you'll find merchandise there. You'll find previous episodes there, and just a little bit about what we're up to. You can also get some free information that also will keep you a little busy, helping you figure out what it is you need to do in your next step. So with that being said, I want to introduce my sponsor, which is Rise. When you need a supply company to rise to your needs, call Resource Industrial Supply Equipment. They have sponsored every show, and I'm incredibly grateful. I am also grateful for Dr. Kaci Myers, who's a life enhancement coach, also called the Cardiologist of the Emotionally Scarred, which I thought was pretty cool. She's joining me today from Speaking Freedom TV, and we're going to make sure that we do as much as possible to help you. She is a certified life, sex, and relationship coach, and I think that all of that combined is actually a very good thing, and you're wonderful. I'm excited to have you here. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you tell us something about yourself.
Thank you for having me. Like Dr. Coleman said, I am a certified life, love, sex coach. I actually have about 7 certifications. I'm also a certified mediator and a notary. I am an author. I have about 12 books that are available and a paperback. So I have 6 audiobooks, and then I have workbooks that correspond with the audiobooks. I have been doing this for about 10 plus years. I've always been a natural advice giver. I used to hate it, really. I used to be like, well, I'm the youngest one out of all of my cousins. Why do people call me for advice? But I've learned to embrace it, especially with my intuitive nature, because I feel a lot of things inwardly. So it's good to be able to help people with that.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about your books, and so that people can know about it, because I always like to encourage people to get a book, because you can't always get to the person itself, but books are a big help.
Yes, so I have my 4 books are the first 4 are Faith Collection, and it is Faith 101, 201, 301, and 401, and it is literally a coursework of learning how to operate in your faith, your purpose, and just walking in alignment with what you are supposed to do on your journey in life. So those books and workbooks really it really tests you to understand more about yourself and your relationship with God. I also have a book called The Unknown Power of a New Believer. That book is really about understanding how powerful we are before religion weighs us down, and a lot of the traditional things that can sometimes in church settings and outside of church settings, it makes you feel less than or like you're not enough. And
Mhm.
then when enough disappointment happens to those around you, that their disappointment can kind of come in and bombard you and your faith. So the book is really about understanding how powerful we are when we are baby Christians or baby believers, new believers, fresh, learning God, because we haven't had that disappointment and all of the things that can come and weigh us down and make us feel like our faith is small. The next book that I have is my baby. It took about 10 years to develop. Spiritual Human Behavior. It is a book that is designed to help you understand your defense mechanisms, help you understand yourself and accept yourself so that you can be a more loving person. And then also, really, the main goal is for you to understand how the things that you've experienced in life has shaped you, has changed you, and how to get back to the real you versus the you that you had to become to protect yourself, survival mode. A lot of people use the term narcissist a lot. And a lot of times people aren't narcissistic. They're in survival mode. They're doing what they've had to do to make it to where they are, and that's all they know. And until they break those strongholds or break those defense mechanisms, at least to a level of understanding, then it is easy to think this is just who I am versus learning who you truly are and not who you had to become. So all of my books are geared at understanding yourself, accepting yourself, and really fully developing your purpose, your gifts, your talents, your skills, so that you can be the best version of yourself. Now, last but certainly not least, I have another book. My first book is actually right here. It is called It's My Time. Oh, excuse me. So with this book, this is literally a autobiography written in third person that describes my growing up, my childhood, overcoming my mother trying to kill me, and some other trials like being in the military, and then coming into my relationship with God through religion at the time, and even in the about the author, I talk about how I would make other books a faith collection, a collection of other books to help you. And that was done in 2006. So I actually manifested and followed through with everything that I said that I wanted to do.
Fantastic. I think those are great books and those are great tools for those of you who are listening so that you can begin to change your life. And even if you think you're sitting in the best, perfect life right now, there's always something new that you can learn as you begin to work on yourself. So tell us a bit about you deciding to become a certified life, sex, and relationship coach. Because generally people don't mix those. They do your life, they do the sex, they do the relationship, but you sort of figured out that they're all together.
Well, surprisingly enough, I'm also an ordained minister. So what when I talk about the soul and becoming whole, it you are a human being. As humans, we all have sexual desires. Like it's human nature to have these things. But a lot of times, our sex lives are determined by trauma, and then that trauma is because of life issues. So, and then those life issues affect your relationships. So I found that as a young woman, I've always liked sex. I've liked the enjoyment of sex. Touch is my love language. So, naturally, when I started going to church, I couldn't have sex as much, but I would always laugh and joke and encourage the people who were getting married. So, if I got invited to a bridal shower, I would bring the chocolate syrup. I would go to Spencer's and get the little, the things that would make your sex life exciting once you get married, especially in the church atmosphere. So that part kind of came natural. In about 2014, I made a post. Me and one of my friends made a post about oral sex. And in that post, it kind of, on an underground level, it went viral. A lot of people started gleaning to the post about sex. So, for for Valentine's Day, I wanted to actually help people to understand how to enjoy Valentine's Day, not just that day, but to have a continued engaging sex life. So that's where the sex part come in. And as I stated before, I've been helping people with their lives for a long time and giving people advice. So I figured instead of micromanaging and compartmentalizing different aspects of us, let's deal with the whole complete version of us. Because when you address your soul and your purpose and you start living a more divine life, naturally everything else gets better. Your business gets better, your life gets better, sex gets better because you're choosing better partners, and just overall it makes your soul a better place. So you become a better person, especially once you start tearing down those defense mechanisms. Really understanding it's not a tearing down, because some things you will need long term. Some experiences that you had was really there to help prepare you for what you will face, because there are going to be people that will try you in a way to where you might not need to be mean all the time. You might not need to have an attitude all the time, but you definitely sometimes need to use those aspects of you to protect yourself, to guard your heart, and to be the best version of yourself. So instead of telling people, oh, you shouldn't act like that or you shouldn't be like that, you just have to learn how to use those elements of yourself.
So, what are some of the main issues people look to you to help them walk through?
It's really more about spiritual balance. I most times give guidance to people so I'm normally drawn to people. Um I don't take one-on-one clients per se. I am drawn to those who I felt led to. So in general, normally people come about relationship issues or understanding their purpose and spirituality, and then I kind of use whatever that information is that they're seeking in a community-based way to speak broadly about how people end up in certain situations, certain circumstances, and then I publish it on Speaking Freedom TV so that people are able to listen to, if somebody else was in a situation like yours, if you have questions about a different situation, then these are the answers that you need, at least to broaden your mind frame and understand life around you. Because sometimes we get so caught up in what we see and the box that we've created in our world that we forget what happens in the world around us, especially when it comes to sex and life just in general. Even spirituality is no cookie cutter way to live life. It is case by case. It's a personal investment into your journey, and that investment is time, the energy to understand yourself, to giving yourself time to really value yourself. Because the more you understand yourself, the more you understand and accept the different portions of you, regardless of what it is that somebody might tell you, you shouldn't like this, or you shouldn't act like this, or you shouldn't move like this. If you accept all of that about yourself and you understand how the different events of your life has shaped you, then it makes you a more loving person so that you can understand and accept the people around you. And then that's what builds community. That's what helps purpose become bigger than yourself.
So, you mentioned trauma of your mother trying to kill you.
Mhm.
So, how did you handle that?
So I was 17 when it happened. And initially I don't know if there was a mindset to handling it. I literally ended up being homeless. I didn't talk to my mother for a while. It was very rocky. It's still rocky sometimes today, although it's gotten much better. But at the time, I ended up being homeless. I lived with a cousin, then I lived with one of her friends that helped me get my GED, because my mother literally would not sign the paperwork for me to progress in life. It was like she wanted me to stay stagnant. So eventually, after I got my GED, I ended up going to the army. And when I went to the army, it was like a fresh start. It was everything that I needed. It was discipline, structure, and the things that I wasn't getting at home. So it really was just me adapting to what life threw my way. I felt guided though. I literally graduated basic training on my 18th birthday, and that was the primary reason I believe that I went and I signed up for the day that I signed up to go, because they told me you'll graduate on your birthday. And I was just like, oh, that just sounds like that's the way I'm supposed to, like, that's the way life was supposed to be. So joining the military kind of helped me, um, I want to say kind of not deal with it, but dealing with it in a way to where I remove myself from the situation. And I just kind of, when you're young, you don't know what it's supposed to be like. You only know what you see. So I had seen other people's parents be better parents, but in general, everybody's parents had their own dysfunction. So when I was assaulted by my mom, it was just like, okay, so what do I do now? I've always been solution focused. So the next best thing was to figure out what life would be after that.
Yeah, I experienced homelessness, but it was much later in life. And I found that um, my being homeless made other people nervous that used to know me, because I guess they could see themselves maybe in that situation. So was that your experience?
Well, no, I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and I had a lot of friends that were displaced and kind of like in the streets, so to speak. Even if they weren't homeless, it was just people that they could do whatever they wanted to do. My mother had not, she worked at GM all my life, so third shift. So I really could do what I wanted to. I was on my own probably from the age of 13. She would leave me home, and I was kind of just on my own. So I don't think that after my mom tried to kill me, my mother really painted the story as though I attacked her. So a lot of people were like, "Well, are you sure you're doing the right thing? You shouldn't have did that." And it made me kind of defensive, but it made me have to learn to stand my ground. And it kind of directed me. So when I went into the military, what actually happened was a lot of people started going into different branches of the military, kind of following in my footsteps, if you would say. Now, I won't say following in my footsteps, but after I went, I can name at least 5 or 6 people that was like, "Oh, well, if she could do it, then I could do it." And, that is kind of what sustained me.
So it was like you were showing them a way to a path to a different life. And
Yeah,
that, yeah, and I think people do sort of watch us to see what works, and if it's, you give them a little bit of idea about what they can do too. So
definitely.
with someone who's experienced some trauma like that, what recommendations would you give them? And I know trauma takes all forms, because trauma is trauma. So, what recommendations would you give them to try to get past that? Because all too often, we allow trauma to dictate who we're going to be and how our lives are going to turn out.
I would just say don't lose hope. Believe in yourself. There are a lot of people that won't see the goodness in you. It doesn't matter how smart you are. I was a sporadic straight A student, honor roll student. So when I wanted to prove myself, I would get A's and B's just to say, okay, I'm gonna show y'all that I am intelligent. But then after I show y'all this, I'm gonna do what I want to do. And so never lose hope, never lose focus of who you are, because at the end of the day, whether it's your mom that tries to tear you down or another family member, you have to be sure in yourself. And it's not always easy. It's not always, you know, just join the military. Sometimes you have to figure out what you want to do. And it took me months. It took me about my mother tried to kill me probably right around my 17th birthday. And I joined the military about 10 months later. So it took me some trial and error. I literally was like living with a friend. And I remember there was a guy that I worked with at some point. I worked a job since I was probably about 13, 14. I would do summer jobs. I did college tours. It was like I had all the keys to success, but I didn't have the guidance to get me there. So sometimes we have to be our own guidance. Sometimes we have to be our own cheerleaders. And once you begin to move along the path, sometimes those doors open. So the guy that I knew that I worked with, while being homeless, I moved with a cousin. She kicked me out, and then I lived with a friend for a couple of weeks. And during that time, the guy that I knew, he took me away from the house, and he was like, you can't stay here anymore. Like, they want to put you out in the street. They're going, they're saying that if you don't, if you're not bringing anything to the household, then you're going to have to, like, I didn't know if I was going to get raped, if he was going to make me be a streetwalker. I didn't know what it was that I was going to face, but that gentleman, I felt like he was an angel sent by God. And he took me, and I remember sitting downtown Dayton, Ohio, and him talking to me about life. And I was like in a whole complete trance. And from there, it was kind of like God guided my footsteps. But the thing is, we have to be open to the guidance. We can't say, well, it can't be from this person, or God wouldn't use that person. You never know who God will use, but you have to be open to um the spirit of God, that intuitive nature within you, that sometimes we'd be like, well, man, I knew I shouldn't have did that, or I knew I should have did that. And it's learning to trust that voice inside of you that's trying to guide you, because your soul is going to guide you in the direction that you need to go. And the only time it's not going to work is if you get off.
So a lot of people know that they need to listen to the intuitive spirit, that they need to listen to God. They don't know how. So what steps could you share that helped you, that maybe could help some of those listening and or looking at this program?
So I actually talk about this in Spiritual Human Behavior and in some of the faith books, because God can speak to you in many different ways. Now, when I was younger, it was more of an urge within myself to do a certain thing, or sometimes like I get goosebumps. Even when I was telling this story earlier, I get goosebumps, and whenever I get goosebumps, I feel like that's a spiritual thing that allows me to know it's either something that I'm saying or experiencing that is in alignment, and this is the path that I need to be on. But God will speak to you. God will put a thought in your mind, give you a little nudge into a direction. And then if you don't listen, then God will send somebody often to remind you of what God was telling you in your soul, the thing that you feel deep down in your heart. And then sometimes it's through a message on TV. It could be like, I am a person that I could be watching a movie. I actually have a Facebook post that I think it might have been a few years ago on this day, and it was like I was watching SpongeBob, and I got something spiritual from SpongeBob the movie. So there is no limit to how God can speak to you, but as we grow and mature, then you'll see signs, like you might see a red bird. A red bird could be an indication for you that your thoughts are aligned, or that you're headed in the right directions. But there's also distractions. So when I first started fine tuning my spiritual hearing, I could be thinking about something so profound, and then like an ambulance would come, and then my thoughts would be like, ah, man, what was I just thinking about? So sometimes it's also knowing when you're on to something big, and when something tries to throw you off, and then remembering, okay, well, what was I thinking about before that distraction came and shifted my perspective? So it's not one way that God will speak to you, but you will feel the energy of when it's God's presence on whatever it is that you are receiving from the message. You will feel the negativity too if it's not God. But that is a fine tuning that you have to do within yourself. It's kind of like trial and error. And I suffered a long time after I got divorced, because I was like, well, man, how can I hear from God clearly? But then I go and I do something that led to hurt or pain. But what I realized is that sometimes we enter relationships and friendships that it may have been supposed to be an acquaintance, and that may have not been the relationship that you're supposed to be sexually involved in or romantically involved in. But we are so quick as humans to, oh, we got a connection, and we think this is supposed to be romantic. And sometimes it's not meant to be romantic. It may have been chemistry so y'all could work together 5 years from now. But if you sleep with the person before you figure out what God wanted you to do with that person, then you ruin the opportunity that God was trying to set up for you. So it all of those things kind of play into each other, because once you get to fine tuning, then you'll know within yourself what's God, what's my ego, and then what's just a distraction to try to separate me from where I'm supposed to be.
Now, you mentioned aligning with our spiritual healing and spiritual balance. So, when people are doing that, a lot of people ask, well, what if I get it wrong? So, and so what happens if you get it wrong?
You can't really get it wrong. There is no mistakes in life. There are lessons that leads to blessing, because if you go through something bad and you can learn something from that bad thing, then that is a blessing. What people would call a blessing in disguise, because what you learn from a bad situation can prevent you from going through the same situation and creating a cycle of bad things happening. Because now, if you deal with a person that's a habitual liar, there are some indicators that would have told you that that person was a habitual liar, or that that person lies. So now, after you've experienced somebody that's giving you a hard time, there are indicators that you can look out for to say, you know what? Ah, that looks familiar. That feels familiar. And not in a way to where you're so timid and scared to where now you think that everything is a lie. But you learn to allow situations, people, places, and things to prove themselves. And that is the real thing. There is no perfect person. Um, in the grand scale of what people think perfect is. There's always this, you should be like this. But
Right.
you are created to be you, because you're an individual. You have your own purpose, you have your own goals, you have your own things that you're supposed to experience that somebody else may never experience. So when you grasp that part, then now you know that, okay, I might have experienced something difficult, but that wasn't to hinder me, unless it's because I knew I wasn't supposed to do something. And although I knew I wasn't supposed to do it, I went and did it anyway. Now, if you keep doing that enough, you might find yourself in jail, or in a bad relationship, because there are always indicators that say, you know what, nope, nope, don't do that. Nope, don't do that. But will you listen? Will you at least take time to consider those things that make you feel some type of way, whether it's a good way or a bad way? It's almost like with manifesting. A lot of people talk about manifesting, but manifesting is really following through. If you pray to God for $10,000 to pay off some bills, and you get $5,000 and you blow the 5,000, then you wasn't prepared for the 10,000. But if you get the 5,000 and you apply it where you feel led to apply it, and then you get the other 5,000, then you've manifested whatever it is that you were believing that 10,000 for. But if you screw it up, if you don't do what you're supposed to do with it, then it's almost like a lesson, because you wasn't prepared. So what do you do the next time? I remember I got my first $20,000 getting out the military, and my heart was in the right place. I had prayed to pay off my car and all of these things. And you know what I did? I kind of blew it. I blew it in a spiritual way, because I gave most of it away. I gave a couple thousand at the church, a couple thousand to the pastor, a couple thousand to a girl that my heart felt led to give to her. And I don't regret any of it, but I didn't do what I prayed to God to allow me to do. And then it's like, I can't blame God, because God gave the provision, but what did I do with it? So it's a lot of trial and error. That's how you learn. The things that you consider a mistake are really the ways you learn how to hear from God. Because if you make enough bloopers trying to follow God, then eventually you're going to understand when it's God and when it's you, when to keep going and when to kind of ease up a little bit.
I know I always tell people, I'll say, well, I prayed for this money. And I says, well, what did you ask God to? Why did you ask God? Well, to do this, but I got this bill over here I need to pay. I says, no, no, no. Do with the money what you told God you were going to do. Trust me, God knows that other bill is out there. That's
Mm-hmm.
coming. But you have to show that you are trustworthy, that you're going to keep your word. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure you keep your word. So all of those listeners, if you pray for money for the telephone bill and it come, pay the telephone bill. I don't care if the water bill is due too. Pay the telephone bill, because this spirit knows what you need. It just needs to know that you're going to keep your word like it kept its word. So
Yes.
so true. That's something we've got to work on. Gosh, because I know I used to blow it. I don't anymore. Okay, so nah.
But it took you to learn not to blow it.
It did. It took me to learn, and I'm telling you, the second time you got to pray to manifest that, whatever.
The same. And
It
the
takes
funny
forever.
part, my car ended up getting repossessed, but I couldn't even be mad. You know why? Because I blew it. That was my fault. But you know what? I never did again. I'll never let another car get repossessed.
Right. That's right. That's right. And you'll always do with the money what you said you're gonna do the money.
What I prayed for, because if I don't, then I can't blame God. I can't say God didn't come through, because God came through. But what did you do when God came through?
And a lot of times I think we pray for a little bit because we're not sure that the prayer is going to be answered. No, ask for what you need. Just ask for all of it, whatever it is. Okay?
I I've gotten bold with God. I'm kind of in the
Oh, right.
place with myself and with God to where I'm like, hey God, hey, if you gonna do it, then do it, because this is my arrangement with God. God, if you take care of me, if you make sure that I'm okay, then I'm gonna take care of your people. I don't want to necessarily charge to help people. This is kind of why I don't take one-on-one clients, and it's better for me to put information out there so that people can have access to it for free. Because I told God, God, you paid my $30,000 in student loan debt. I don't have a student loan bill. So guess what? That's money that I don't have to charge people to try to pay this student loan bill. So if you give it to me, if you make sure that I'm taken care of, then I'm gonna take care of whatever you say. So whatever you say, let's do it. And then I've even gotten even more bold. Like, okay, God, if you want me to do this, then you make it happen, and I'm gonna do it. And it's kind of, but when God does stuff, guess what? I gotta follow through. Now I got to do what I told God that I was gonna do, because that's our arrangement.
That's right. That's the arrangement. Fantastic. So I know you hear from people even through your, probably in the grocery store, even, if you're like me, you can't go to the grocery store near your house because people stop you. So, but when people are hurting, and we are, what do you think is one thing that people could do that would help everyone, no matter their situation?
Hurt, it depends on what type of hurt it is. Because sometimes you really need to sit with yourself. A lot of people struggle with sitting with themselves, especially during this pandemic. You really seen it, because people, they, instead of being home and trying to understand themselves more and figuring out what they would do with themselves, a lot of people turn to liquor, alcohol, drugs, and even just trying to be out amongst other people because they can't stand to be alone with themselves. So you have to be able to make peace with yourself. And when you're able to make peace with yourself, then your life will begin to change. Your perspective will change, because now you're not it's not like I need something to distract me from what's going on with my life. Now you can face your life and be at peace with your life, so that you can now do the things that you are meant and called to do.
Yes, I did. I agree. I noticed that too. I'm one of the few people who actually enjoyed it. Just I
Mhm.
caught up on books, and I tell people, that chore or that project you were going to do when you had time, you have time now. So do that.
Mhm.
And I was amazed, even as I do a lot of self-reflection, but I was even amazed at how comfortable I was just being. And it gave me a chance to get out in nature and do
Mhm.
some of that, and that was just wonderful. So I wish people could do more of that. I think people should set aside some time every day where not only do they pray, but they meditate. They just sit with themselves.
It
And
would take for a lot of people to address the things that they don't want to accept about themselves, the hard things, the trauma. Because a lot of times when you get to sitting by yourself, then your mind gets to wander. Then and people, depression is real, but a lot of depression is just not facing the things that you've been through. Because if you begin to face them and you begin to put things into perspective, if you begin to acknowledge the trauma, but also acknowledge how that shaped you into a better person and not hang on to the hurt and the bitterness, it will change your world so drastically to where now sitting by yourself is more at peace than being around people. But there are some people that they cannot function without other people being around, and that's more unhealthy than being able to be at home. Even if you're sad, you might be sad some days. It's okay. That is a human emotion. Sadness is okay. Having spells of crying is okay. Now you shouldn't sit in it. You shouldn't wallow in it. I don't listen to a lot of gospel music because a lot of times those songs really can make you more depressed. You can be sitting there and you might be feeling fine and you turn on the right song and now you're like, oh,
oh, right, right.
but a lot of that is because the spirit in which some of the music is made from is from a person's hardship. So if you're listening and you're identifying with that person's hardship, it doesn't bring you out of hardship. It just makes you sulk more than anything. So it's about doing things that's going to uplift you, that's going to put life into you and not make you sit around like it's people that listen when they go through a breakup, they listen to all the saddest songs that they can think. They just want to sulk. I don't want to do that. I'm gonna sulk, I'm gonna think about it, I'm gonna process it, and then guess what? I need to turn on something that's gonna make me feel like I'm empowered, I'm
Mhm.
strong, I can get over anything that's going on, and that's gonna allow me to press forward in a way that it really revitalizes my purpose and it gives me more strength to carry on.
Yeah, and I think that, if you're gonna have a pity party or you're gonna have a they done me wrong party, have a good one, okay, and give it a time limit.
Mhm.
Get out of it. Sit down, maybe an hour, two max, and just be as sad as you want to be and do all that and do all the writing. I advise you to write.
Yes, figure out your plan. Figure out.
Right. And
Mhm.
then let it be over and let's move on because you've got new experiences. Like you said, we've got a whole life to live. Just a
Mhm.
whole
And,
life to live.
and sometimes the writing it down and figuring it out just so that it comes out of you. When you don't release it, sometimes we don't have people to talk to. Sometimes we don't feel like we having a support system. So sometimes journaling and writing can be a support system. Now, I'm not telling you to put all your business on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but sometimes you do need to voice yourself. It's not about seeking a pity party or sympathy or anything like that. But sometimes other people are going through just as much as you. And although there are some people that's happy that you're going through, there are some people that's like, man, I'm glad that I'm not the only one. And you'd be surprised at how many people are going through similar situations and need that same type of support. And that's called a peer support because when your peers are going through it with you, you don't feel like you're alone. And a lot of things that we go through as Black women or non-Black women, just women in general and men, because men struggle a lot more because they're not able to express themselves. They're not able to. They're always taught, don't be emotional, don't show your feelings, don't do this, instead of learning emotional intelligence or emotional understanding so that they can process those things. But when you really just take a second and get to know yourself and then begin to understand your emotional responses, because you might respond to something emotionally that may not bother somebody else. They may not respond the same way. So that's why it's important to know yourself and your responses and what triggers you, because we don't avoid triggers, but if you know what trigger you, then you know how to operate and you know how to respond. You can kind of temper your response instead of going completely off. You might be like, oh, I can identify I am triggered, so let me calm down because I know that I'm triggered right now, and that is the most important part.
That's right. You got to handle that trigger. But be gentle with yourself because if you blow, you'll blow it. I blew one the other day. I blew it the other day. Just be gentle with yourself because it's
But it's okay to blow it. That is normal. It's natural. It is not something wrong with you because you might spaz out every now and then. It might be good to spaz out. It might be good to kind of lose it a little bit because guess what? Normally those things come from holding on. You let something slide, and you let something else slide, and you keep
right.
letting stuff slide, and you gonna slide all right. You're gonna slide into a outburst, and not it may not be bad, it may not be dramatic, but if you begin to address little things, and it might not have to be addressed with anybody but you, and that's just acknowledging, you know what, the other day, that person or that thing or that situation, it really got up under my skin. So, one, why did it get up under your skin? Because if you understand why it got up under your skin, it will help you navigate when other things similar come to you in that same realm of thinking or understanding. And then, okay, so if this is the reason why I got up under my skin, normally there is a, a core thing, a memory or an experience that made that become a trigger. And then now, okay, I understand why it bothered me, understand the root cause of why it's bothering me. So now what do I do to allow it to bother me less?
Great advice. That is absolutely fantastic advice. Now, uh, I guess bouncing back to the sex part, do you do you encounter sexual people who are sexually addicted, uh, or are people saying they are, but they're actually running from something else? They have another issue.
So, dealing with the sex part, it is so. Let's start here. I'm celibate. I've been celibate for about 7 years. I've chosen celibacy. I have like a monk-ish life. Like like I still have the little things that I might curse a little bit here and there, but for the most part, I have a very structured, purposeful life. So when it comes to other people, what I've learned is that people have all types of issues. You have people that's dealing with molestation, trauma. You got
Mhm.
people that's dealing with marriages that are sexless or empty. You do have people that have addiction problems with sex and all of those things. But it's common. All of those things are really common. And it's so common to where it's a matter of helping people get comfortable with their sexuality, with their sexual past, and then shifting it so that they are not just out here. Like some people, they don't know any better. Nobody ever told them that, like, you might not have a mother that's talking to you about sex. So when you started having sex, you were sneaking and having sex, and now that sex is an addiction because it's sneaking. But what I found is that overexposure and underexposure both have negative effects. If you're not exposed to sexuality, sex, and that sexual nature enough, then when you get the exposure to it, you become obsessed with it. Like, oh my God, like I can't keep my eyes off of. I've never seen it. It's so intriguing that you become somewhat addicted to it. But if you have too much exposure, then it is also similar. Now it's like nothing even bothers you. So if you're have too much exposure and you get married, now you're not even as sexually aroused by your wife because you're seeing it so much to where now what she's offering just seems like okay, it's just run of the mill. So it comes in all shapes and sizes when it comes to um sexuality and dealing with people. It is it's no one size fit all. I joined a lot of poly groups. I joined a lot of different groups so that I can understand different people's understandings, perspectives, and desires. I actually found myself at a swingers party a couple weeks ago that I did not realize that I was going to. It was kind of like, oh my God, how did I end up here? But what it showed me and exposed me to was that people have different desires. So if you do have a problem with either porn or um overindulging in sex, there are people that identify with you, and it's about gravitating to your people. It's like, if you play games, don't be with somebody that is not with playing games. Gravitate to the people that's in your realm of things. So if you have a sex problem, don't marry a person or be with a person that is a square, and like they don't have any sexual experience, unless they're open to you helping them, showing them, teaching them, or else it's going to be an imbalance. And a lot of times what it is kind of like what I said earlier. You jump into a relationship with somebody that you don't kind of know, you don't really, and then you have sex, and then you don't know their sexual past, you don't know their sexual tendencies and all of those things. So you end up marrying a person with a high sex drive, marries what we call a prude, and then they're like, well, we're not happy. Of course, because you should have asked a little bit more questions before y'all decided to get married. Because one person with a high sex drive is always going to end up cheating if the other person is not either that into the person or just doesn't have a heightened sex drive. And sometimes a low sex drive or low libido is not a physical thing. It can be medical issues, it can be mental trauma that causes you to not be able to get aroused or get whether it is getting an erection or vaginal dryness or moisture. All of those things are not always sexually related. Some of those things are medically related, but then sometimes the relationship that you build with your partner will determine the type of sexual relationship you have. So if you're in a marriage right now, make sure you're doing things that keep the spice in your relationship. Open up the door for your wife, smack her on the butt when she go in. Now, it might be uncomfortable at first because especially if it's something new, but it is bringing the playfulness into your marriage so that when it's time to have sex, it doesn't feel like a chore for you or for her. It's like, oh yeah, we've been building up and we're waiting for this. And that is really the most problem in relationships. It's not enough chemistry building. It's not enough playfulness in the relationship. So when it's time to have sex, it's like, oh my God, it's time. Let's go. And it's not
Right.
instead of it instead of it being like, ooh, yeah, I've been waiting on this. And that's how sex should feel. Like, I've been waiting on this, whether we've been around the house and he's looking over your shoulder while you're cooking, or just. But some of the other part is, I was on a show a couple of weeks ago, and the lady was like, her one of her issues is that her husband is not taking out the trash, he's not doing stuff. So, in my advice is like, well, maybe if he did those things, and hopefully her husband listened to the show, because sometimes acts of service, doing the things around the house, will be what makes a woman be like, man, my husband is just so, he just does things and I don't have to ask. And that can make a woman want to be sexually involved with you.
Yeah, having a man active around in the house chores is a turn on for a lot of women. I don't think men know that. Like you said, they don't talk about it.
Hmm.
So in the relationship, when do you recommend people start talking about their sexual likes, desires? Because some people have things they have to have, and some people have those deal breaker things.
In the course of getting into a relationship, some things can wait. When it comes to sex, you kind of need to know what you're getting yourself into. I don't believe in the 90-day rule. When I got married in 2007. Prior to getting married, we did not have sex. We did not kiss. We did not do anything. Like, we did it the Bible. We was like, okay, we're not doing nothing. And that did not make the relationship last. A lot of people think that if you do it a certain way, that's going to guarantee the relationship, and it's not. So it's really being open to understanding what is going to work for you. But in order to be understanding with that, you definitely have to talk about it. Now, I'm turned off when a guy tries to talk about sex and all that the first date, but they're probably turned off too, because my response is, I'm celibate and I'm not going to be with anybody until I know it is somebody that I want to spend some time with in my life. And not only that, somebody that I trust my life with, because sex is very pivotal. I don't think that soul ties are only with sex, because I can have a friend that dumps on me and shares her life story with me, and I share my life story, and those souls get tied in that, and it's hard to let go of friendships. But sex is very spiritual. And the more spiritually connected you are with your person, the better the sex will be. So it's everything when it comes to sex is just subjective, because no two people are the same. So what works for one person, just like in relationships, what works for one relationship might not work in another relationship. So you really have to work on communicating early on, because why go on date number 15 if you could have found out the answers you need in date number 3? Don't waste your time. Don't waste your own time, okay?
That's right. And for those listening, if you've got some interesting sexual needs, you need to talk about that early. Okay? You need to talk about that.
Yeah.
That way
Yeah.
you're not
Yeah.
wasting your own time. You're right. Not wasting your time, their time, because people do need to know. And people know when they like things that could possibly be a deal breaker. So don't be stringing folk on.
Yeah,
Just talk.
and that's the thing.
Mhm.
Knowing to understand deal breakers, you really have to have conversation. The communication is the biggest gap in a relationship. So I wouldn't say talk about sex the first date, but maybe the second or third, you might try to, get an understanding.
Second or third date, you need an understanding. If you like whips and chains and everything, you need to talk about it on the second date, okay?
Because guess what? You think it on the third date, you're about to go back to your place and you're gonna be 50 Shades of Grey. And that person may not be there mentally. I've never
That's
been
it.
into those things. So I want to know if that's what you like, because I'm gonna tell you because if that is what you need, I can't do that for you. So now you got to go to a dungeon place, and now you got to go and solicit.
Right,
And then here's the role of when it comes into, it seems like an addiction, but it's not really an addiction outside of your marriage or relationship. It's just you like certain things for whatever reason you like it, whatever it is. But you
right,
have to address it earlier on, because if you're going to need to go to one of those dungeoness and the mistresses and all of that, then one, I'm the type of person. If you're gonna cheat, we gonna cheat together. We gonna be in there together. We gonna whatever we doing it together, or we're not gonna do it.
right. Or you're not doing it right. Oh. So when it comes to careers, how having the career you want and taking care of your emotions, do you find that those are related? That we can actually you, be emotionally scarred, and that would and not dealing with that can keep us from being successful in our professional lives.
Yes. So the career that you want may not be the career that you need. You are naturally talented, gifted, um, in every area that you were created to be, but you have to begin to learn those skills, gifts, and talents in order for you to really go down the path. So a lot of not understanding our career choices or not picking the right career is because we don't know ourselves. And so we're trying to do what mom and them told us, that we should do this and we should go to college for this and we should do that and you should be like this. And then a lot of times I remember growing up having a factory around where I lived. Everybody was aspiring to go and work at GM. That was the thing. But then when GM closed down, now what are people aspiring to do? So it's not going along with what everybody else is doing. It's really learning to understand yourself. And then, yeah, if you are emotionally off, if you've been put down, if you've been kind of led astray by the voices of other people, then it's likely for you to choose a career path that you don't be fulfilled in. And that's how a lot of people are unfulfilled and just working jobs and hating their jobs. I posted a video a while back, and it was a guy, and he's just like, oh my God, I'm just sitting here and I can't believe, I mean, he's crying in his car about going back to work after his lunch break. And at some point, you got to say, okay, if this isn't working, I'm not going to be miserable for $1. And being able to accept what you really want. And
Mhm.
sometimes it takes for you to do something uncommon to get there, because a lot of people, they're doing what they're comfortable with. But sometimes you got to get uncomfortable to get what you're determined and destined to be.
That's true. And people do need to open up their minds and imagination about what they could possibly do. I think sometimes we limit ourselves, like you said, to what others have done. But allow yourself to dream a little bit. let the universe play in your head and help you understand and guide you where you want to be. So
It's
now,
really a matter. It's kind of a matter of trial and error, testing out the things that you are drawn to. If you have an interest in something, learn about it, read it, get an understanding. Because even if you aren't supposed to do that, it could play into the bigger picture of where you're supposed to be. Before I started life coaching, how I got into life coaching, I was working at University of Phoenix. I was a financial counselor, and I really enjoyed helping people figure out what they wanted to do in college. But it took me to I went to school for accounting. I went to school for banking and finance. I went to school for computers. I went to school for a lot of stuff before I ended up where I needed to be. But when I look at it now, all of those things that I were doing, it plays into who I am now and all of the things that I needed to be.
it's fantastic. That is good advice. Try different things out. Yeah. Because, I love numbers. So, but not everybody likes numbers like that. So they're my friend. It's like, 2 plus 2 is always 4, They don't lie. So I love them. But in this day and age, there's just so many things you can try. And you don't have to take years. You can take 1 or 2 classes to know what you like. You're right. Just give yourself permission to explore. So we're coming to the close.
It's really about just trying.
Okay. Yeah, we're coming to the close of today's session. So what would you like to leave us with? And also make sure we know how to get in touch with you in case someone wants to reach out and watch and follow you on your own program.
Well, first, you can follow me on Instagram at Speaking Freedom. I'm also on Twitter and Speaking Freedom TV on YouTube. My final thoughts for today is be the best you that you can be. Try to shed everything that people told you should be and become who you feel deep down within your soul. That child that's inside that, you might not want to be childish, but the inner child in you needs to balance with the adult in you. And that's where you will find the purpose that you're supposed to do.
Fantastic. And how can people, they can follow you again on Instagram and on YouTube at Speaking Freedom TV. And
yes,
where
everything
else?
is Speaking Freedom.
Okay,
if you would like to go to my website, you can go to speakingfreedom.org, speakingfreedomtv.org, and then where you can buy the books and see the books is edu-freedom.org/shop.
Okay, so for those of you listening today, be sure you go out and listen to her programs because she has great advice. And I think that she can help us in ways that we need to be helped in order to figure out where it is we need to go and how to get there, because that's incredibly important. And your experience is so much like those of us listening, including myself. So it's really great to have you here and have you actually share words of wisdom with us. So as I always say to my audience, may this day offer you just what you need in each unfolding moment. I want you to be inspired and to further notice, celebrate everything. Do not go gently into that good night, but find a heel worth dying for and take it. Be the person that you are waiting for and make today so awesome that yesterday gets jealous, and above all else, do it your way. I'm Stephanie Wilson-Coleman, the Empowerment Doctor, and as I always say, life is too short to drink cheap champagne, which means life is too short to not experience every single thing that you need to have a great life. So with that, we're going to say good night. So thank you, Dr. Kaci. I enjoyed it, and I enjoy speaking to you again.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Bye now.
She got to life's too short to drink cheap champagne. So I decided to buy me a better brand to taste with my strawberries. What